Hello, today we will be discussing the book Awaken to Love. We will discuss the introduction and chapter 1. The book was written by Laura Patryas. So let's take a moment, look through the introduction and the chapter 1, and maybe you can raise your hand and start the discussion. Yes, Paul?
Yeah, I'm loving this book. I mean, I've never read it. I suggest it because, as I said before, she was at the Young Conference, and the way she held the group was so powerful. That's what impressed me. But anyway, there's a quote on, I think, well, it's on page 7 in the I think I'm on the book, the PDF. But anyway, or on Kindle, I don't know which. Anyway, it's from somebody called a French mystic called Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. And I was just so excited to see him there because when I did one of my, in the past, I did a dissertation on him. So when she quoted him, I was like, oh, okay, I know who this person is. And his quote is, we are not only human beings having a spiritual experience, we are also spiritual beings having a human experience. Both the earthly and the transcendent coexist within us. And I love that. I mean, Teilhard de Chardin, I've got tons of his books. I've obviously, because I did the dissertation. I've not read him for a number of years, but I love listening to him because he looks at spiritual evolution in the context of genetic, or whatever you want to call it, normal evolution, Darwin. He looks at the whole evolution of the human race and the creation, but that it's not just the physical, it's the spiritual evolution and where everything's moving towards. So I was just so excited to see, well, interested to see that she quotes him. And also the fact that, my area is, when I did my master's, mysticism in the sense of the mystics, the Western mystics. She doesn't, I mean, she mentioned him, he's a French mystic. But Western mystics, she doesn't. I mean, I'm familiar with with most of them, and of course, some I did some Buddhism when I did my first degree as well. So, but the unit, and Thomas Merton is a person who unites the two. He's Western and Eastern, and he's also about anyway. So I'm just saying, I thought that she just brings that out, and I think this whole book is going to be about that, as she mentioned, the transcendent, the grant. And another quote on page 10, the transcendent being the universal field of consciousness, the ground of all being, that I refer to as self, though some may call it God. We had a discussion in the previous group about that. And as I said, we can call it self, but then it's not something we possess. I'd have to say that. That's on page 10 at the bottom of the page. We can think, oh, it's self, therefore I possess it and I control it, but we can't control that which is transcendent because it's beyond us. But we can be participating in the transcendent, which is the spiritual journey. I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Anne? Thank you, Paul.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, Paul. Yeah, I think it's interesting because self and IFS is like very much the non-self in a lot of mindfulness and spiritual traditions. And that's kind of, they're referring to that same like universal, very non-egoic thing. And I think there's just not as much as would be ideal that combines acknowledging kind of the transcendent spiritual inhabitation, way of inhabiting your mind and being, as combined with this individuation aspect that's very psychological and very much all the parts of our psyche, and sometimes they can even sound very opposed, like especially with the Buddhist traditions, they very much, like it's all about the non-self and the egoless self, and yet that's a huge part of our reality. And at the same time, there is so much power that comes from tapping into that transcendental way of being. And when you do these neuroscience studies, neuroimaging studies of people in these very transcendent, highly absorbed meditative states, like the networks, you know, roughly corresponding to that sense of I, because there are parts of our brains that are very much like me, like my family, my possessions, my, you know, whoever you're associating with identity, they're like, they've identified networks that like light up when things that are associated with identity are presented to you, or you're asked to think about those things, then they're very quiet. You know, they're very quiet during these types of certain types of meditations, and I guess they're kind of hypothesizing that's when the person's really accessing that kind of transcendental, you know, way of being. And so I just think it's just so great to really combine the two, and then kind of like use the power of both of them to inform the other, because this is what, when you really just focus on the transcendental way of being, you that's where and you ignore, you know, parts and psyche and your psychology, that's when the spiritual bypassing happens, right? That's when you really just shove everything aside. And if the transcendental is so powerful, these like blissful states, or this ability to just float above everything, then you're not like actually dealing with like whatever human issues and stories and relating to other people and all these things. And it's interesting too, because when I sometimes attend like meditation communities, they'll say like, oh, you know, I've reached so much sense of insight about the, you know, the nature of, you know, the universe, or the nature of being and stuff, but then like I can't still solve the conflict in my family, you know. So yeah, anyways, I'm complete.
Hi, this is Marlene. I'll go because I don't see anybody else going right now. I love this book too, and thanks for your shares. This reminds me of polarity. As in the introduction, I was looking at the introduction, which seems to relate to what you were talking about, Paul. To be human is to navigate paradoxical realities simultaneously, embracing contradictions where different truths coexist. This multidimensional experience fuels our creativity and greatness. So to embrace all the different parts, the ones that are in opposition seemingly, to get to know them. I love that, you know, the polarization. We are vulnerable yet indestructible. I mean, that's so powerful. We are unique, yet we are part of the larger whole, inseparable from the larger whole. I love to embrace these contradictions. And it's amazing to me that something that's contradictory can be integrated. So I like this a lot. Thank you. Can I add something to that? Is everybody there? Can you guys hear me?
Sorry, yeah. Yes,
It's
Marlene,
okay
sorry.
if
Yeah.
it's okay if I add something.
Yes, please. Yeah.
I was really touched by the fact that if we have a safe attachment to our caregivers, that the self will not be obscured by the parts. It will be able to access the self. Yet it says caregivers play a pivotal role in regulating our nervous systems and fostering a sense of safety. Now, that's pretty amazing that caregivers have that much power over their children, because if mom, you know, I heard in the other group, if mom has postpartum depression, that blocks off nurturing. If mom is full of phobias and dysregulated herself, then it says that we will be run by parts, trying to control everything, and that we will probably go into firefighters like addictions. And so it's kind of sad to me that this trajectory is so predictable. and that there's so much work to undo later on in life. And the last thing I'm going to say about that is it says a young brain is prone to absorbing the collective burdens and conditioning of lack and fear. And that's huge. Thank you. I'm done.
Thank you. Just quick to say that I'm sure in chapter 1 it says that people who have healthy attachments, they don't go to therapy. Yeah, thank you. MJ?
Yeah, thanks for all that, Marlene. That was really interesting. And because yeah, I know for myself, my mother, I think she had PTSD because she had a lot of loss in a short period of time. And I think she was just extremely anxious, and I think that just affected my whole nervous system. So it's really interesting. And like you said, we have to then figure it out and undo it as adults to figure out what was going on. And then I was just, the whole non-dualism, I'm just kind of confused by that word. And I'm just wondering if people could help me understand exactly what that word means. Paul, maybe you'd be a good person to do that because you've read the book before.
Well, I just see it as another, I prefer the word holistic, non-dual, body, mind, spirit, not splitting things up, that the system as a whole, and that we're open to the transcendent, like that quote from Teilhard de Chardin, we're humans having a spiritual experience, but we're also spiritual having a human experience. Well, they're both the same thing. So I see it as a holistic and non-dual, that we're not, there's no separation. It's a journey to wholeness, which is the goal of all, I think, religion, spirituality, whatever you want to call it, a more whole, integrated, and a journey of my therapist said, and I agree, therapy and spirituality in terms of the journey is the same, which is that's the beauty of IFS. It's very much the case that IFS is a spiritual journey, which is beginning to be recognized with other therapies as well, that spirituality is part of therapy. So, yeah. I was just going to raise as well the point of I'm jumping ahead a bit, but it's in chapter 1. I don't know but anyway, because it's the beginning bit, but what you were just saying there, Mark, where Marlene was, when you were saying about the early care given through parents, and I know for a fact that I was born into PTSD because my grandmother lost her child at the age of 4 in a horrible accident, and my mother, therefore her brother, died at that age. So my grandmother and my mother were both highly anxious, and therefore I've inherited that. And my mother was depressed, I think, through most of her life, and suicidal. And that was part of what I inherited when I was growing up. So she wasn't always there. But there's a quote here that I like. It's on page, where is it? Oh, I had it a minute ago. It's from the introduction, page 11. The parts of us that adopted beliefs need not learn anything new, for they are already one with the self, and they are already perfect. All that is required is to realize that our burdens and beliefs do not define who we truly are. That's on page 11 in the PDF, on my thing anyway. Yeah, you've got it in brown there, Vana. We already are perfect. It's the uncovering. It's not something we need to just unburden. That's what that is. But the one that I was going to jump to in chapter 1, this is more related to what Marlene said, was Winnicott. She mentions Winnicott, who's the child psychoanalyst, and I love him. I've just read his book called The Piggle, which is an analysis of a child who's depressed at the age of 2. And he works with her for 3 years until she's 5. And it's an amazing book. It's an amazing book. And it just shows that, children, the whole relationship and the whole this thing about the primary caregiver and the development of the self and the individuation and whatever you want to call it. So yeah, but yeah, and you know, the uncovering of yeah. I'll just leave it there. Thanks.
Thank you, Paul. Now you mentioned that, and here on this on my Kindle, I highlighted it brown because I was not sure about this. So she says the parts of us that adopted beliefs need not learn anything new, for they are already one with the self, already perfect. All that is required is to realize that our burdens and beliefs do not define who we truly are. But just that before that, it says, like, her book is an invitation to uncondition, unlearn, and unprogram. So it's not about learning, it's about unlearning. And I do find it a little bit, I don't know, I'm not comfortable with this, okay? And maybe I need to learn something here, or unlearn something. Not learn, unlearn, unprogram myself. You know, when she says that the parts of us that adopted beliefs need not learn anything new. And I'm like, really? What about my limiting beliefs? No, I need to learn something different. Or maybe I'm using the wrong words and I should say unlearn. The parts that have limiting beliefs, they need to unlearn and unprogram. But again, I don't see those parts as they're already one with the self. I'm like, no, my system says, no way. They're fighting with each other. They're not one with the self. They're not perfect. Perfect? No way. Kind of, my whole system is kind of like rebelling against this sentence. You know, that's why it's in brown. I'm like, you know, I don't get that. Anyway, I'm complete. Marty?
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to just share or answer MJ's question around non-duality and what exactly it is. I'm also new to that. But from my understanding, like what Paul was saying, is that I think non-duality is a Sanskrit word that literally means not to. And so I think from the non-dual perspective, it's based on the idea that like all things are interconnected and interdependent. And so it recognizes that there's no such thing as like true separateness, and that everything is interconnected and interwoven in like this complex web of relationships. And like this mind shift is like, I find it to be quite liberating, but at the same time, I do find it to be a little bit unsettling, like what you're saying, Vana. There's a little bit of unnerving there. And I think that's common when you're first introduced to non-duality. So anyways, I don't know if that's helpful in my understanding of its elementary.
I don't know. Yeah, Marie, I'm not sure. I mean, my understanding is non-duality is when you're born and after IFS. When you're born and where you're not separate from, you know, she talks about it in chapter 1, and it's brilliant the way she presents it. You know, in your early years, the early years of your life, you don't feel separate from the world. And you know, everything's great and amazing when you're like in your mom's belly, okay? It's like, wow, you're safe, it's amazing. But once you start growing up and people tell you what you know, judge you, things take a turn. Yeah, Anne?
Oh, I had also highlighted that sentence that you had in brown. I definitely went back and I was like, well, it's clearly not true in its like literal sense, right? Because we have to learn things. We naturally have, you know, we have to learn to be moderate and still push ourselves and still have rest. I don't know if, you know, a child has to learn these skills of even a balanced system that, you know, a completely trauma-free system clearly is learning stuff. And there are beliefs that it's learning at the same time. Now, but that I just reread it and she's like, okay, I think what she means about beliefs is just these like negative, like, oh, we're not worthy, you know. So I just took it more lightly, but I definitely had to reread it. It's like, well, that sentence is clearly not, you know, comprehensively true, but she didn't define every little thing, you know. So I think, I just took it more loosely, like adopted beliefs of shame or like unworthiness. I just stuck that in for her. And then that makes potentially more sense, right? There's nothing to, in terms of being worthy. Gosh, I was gonna say something else. Now I've forgotten, so I think I'll yeah.
And just to reply to that,
Yes.
I guess what she means is like, in the meditation we've done, okay, in her
Yeah.
meditation, she talks about embracing like a warm blanket, all those, parts, maybe the shame or whatever. So even, I'm guessing, even if you have shame or whatever limiting beliefs, parts with limiting beliefs, then
Yes.
somehow you can find that non-duality by embracing it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of, if when you're embracing it, it's that kind of psychedelic experience where you feel very one with the universe and that like universal love, and you feel that unconditional universe love. And once you feel that, I think that it's much easier for those beliefs to seem very small and unreal, and yeah.
So did you mention psychedelic experience? Do we need also
Yeah.
psychedelics to get there?
Well, it's only one way. You can also do the meditations I sent.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I think they're very related, the
It
very
depends how
related.
fast you
Yeah.
need that psychedelic experience.
Yeah. No, exactly. No, absolutely.
Great. Thank you, Anne. Okay.
Oh, thank you. I want to share on this word unlearning. For me, it makes a lot of sense. I have adopted daughter, and I can see, because she was abandoned by her biological mother, she learned to feel worthless, and she needs to unlearn, because it's nothing to do about my daughter. It's all about her mother. And the same with my family of origin. I was a scapegoat, and I learned on a very unconscious level I am worthless. So for me, the unlearning makes like a lot of sense. And I also want to share about the meditation. I enjoy this bit about the moving parts in your body. Move the parts to the different side of your body. And I done that in my, I do Pilates class, and it's so advanced. I go to the sports center, and I have a hoarding addiction. I really struggle to get rid of my things from the loft. The house is very tidy, but when I have to throw something away, it's just so, I have this hoarding pool, and I managed to declutter some things. And in a class, when I went to this Pilates class, and it's so advanced and everyone is so good and, in shape, I said to my firefighters, come on, guys, help me. You retired now. The decluttering is done. You don't have this job. We need to pull all together so I can cope with the class. And I had this extra power, and it's exactly like in a book. You ask this part to move to, I don't know, not to different part of the body, but all this energy they had, my energy was stuck in this clutter. The clutter is gone now, and I want these firefighters to exercise together with me. So I want to be one of the top people in a class. I don't want to be at the bottom. I want to be kind of this like, so I'm just sending messages to my firefighters to change the role, move to the different part. Thank you so much. Thanks for listening.
Ah, okay. And I'm curious, Kate, just a quick question. I'm curious, what is the name of that part that wants them to change and move to a different part? Because here's like, you can notice like a discussion, a dialogue, a telling off between parts.
Yeah, not sure desperation part,
Like, or come on, let's move on. Do better at Pilates. Yeah, great. Thank you very much, Kay. Guys, I have something that I really liked. There was a metaphor I loved in this book in the introduction. But before I go to the metaphor, I just want to just read a little bit about non-duality, like the definition, what MJ was asking. Okay, let's read here. She's Laura Patryas. I'm not sure I can say her. I'm not sure how to pronounce her name. So she says here in her book, I offer a new perspective on non-duality. Rather than positioning it in opposition to multiplicity, I advocate a both-and approach that celebrates the coexistence of unity and diversity as mutually enriching. This integrated approach, which I call duality, recognizes our unique individuality while grounding us in an underlying universal oneness. So her theory recognizes the interconnectedness of all existence as an integrated whole. And then, I highlighted here, it says, I offer a way to integrate our understanding of small self, higher self, and the universal self. And I'm confused as to what the small self is, whether small self is the ego. I'm not sure. Hopefully she'll tell us. Yeah, I don't know. MJ, did you?
Yeah, I was just say that I like to pronounce that word duality, because that seems to encapsulate all of that. So duality, I kind of explains to me, not versus non-dualism. I do like the word duality.
Yeah. Yeah, duality, non-duality. So I guess duality and non-duality is the same kind of thing. New words for us, but I do have a sense that duo, I'm Greek, so it is a Greek number for two, non-dual. So non-duality. So you're like united. But united with everything, even the entire world. The universe. United with our parts and the universe. And embracing the diversity as well. So it's everything.
I'm so glad she's going to cover that in great depth, because I have really struggled with, like, non-duality, if I understand it correctly, does not believe in us as individuals. And so multiplicity, of course, would be opposite. And so I'm thinking, how in the world do you blend non-duality, which is we're all one and we are not independently, we have no independence or separate form, into multiplicity where we're actually divided and fractured into multiple parts, like there's multiple of us. Yeah. So they're completely opposite. And so I've really always wondered, can you even blend non-duality with IFS? Because they literally are. One is believing we are all just one, and the other one's like, no, we're totally multiple. So this is going to be quite a fascinating read for my parts. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. I feel multiple when I'm traumatized, but I feel one when I'm like in harmony with self. That's how I get it. That's how I understand, my system understands it. But yeah. Paul?
Yeah, I mean, another dissertation. I've done 3 dissertations in my life. Another one was when I did my master's, I did on spirituality. I did one on a medieval mystic called Julian of Norwich. And she uses the word of the journey towards oneing. So we're moving towards oneing. It's about, I love her because I love reading the medieval, because the words say a lot more than, and she adds the book, The Revelations of Divine Love. So the whole thing about embrace. And this was a time before there was any division in Christianity. She's the 13th century, I think, 12th century. And, she was all about, the journey from our separateness, our multiplicity towards oneing. She was in the church, so it's a Christian, but even Christians is another word that she uses. Even Christians, we're all and it's this whole idea of compassion therapy. I love compassion therapy as well. So none of this is new. I mean, she was talking about it 600 years ago. But I love her words, her medieval words. She's English, and she uses that say a lot more. Oneing. I love that. We're moving towards oneing. Everything.
How do you spell that?
One, as in the letter one. Oneing.
Yeah.
Oneing, rather than unity. She talks about oneing. She also talks a lot about we're being held, by. She uses lots of metaphors. Anyway, she had a lot of revelations one night when she was nearly dying, and then she spent 20 years. She was an anchoress living in Norwich in England, and that book is so profound for me. One of the most revelatory books I've read. But it's Christian. I mean, that's what there was at the time in Europe. That was the main sort of thing. But it's taken off. It became a phenomenon in the last 100 years. Actually, it was sort of like low key before that. It started to turn now. Anyway, whatever. So yeah, she's talking about the same thing as this. So that's another Western mystic who mystics generally speak the same language. Oh well, they may not speak the same. They're talking about the same reality, shall we say? They may be using different words, but it's the same reality.
What was her name?
Julian of Norwich. I'll put it in the chat.
Oh, thank you.
She's only got the one book. That was that. And it's very beautiful to read. She's wonderful prose. Yeah, okay. I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Hi, Marlene here. Yeah, I really like that whole thing of bringing in spirituality with the psychology of people. This whole thing of non-duality, I like where it says the vertical path. It talks about a vertical path and a horizontal path, and I like that. That's visual. So the vertical path is to God, but it's really transcendent. So it's whatever you want to call it. The vertical path of transcendence, it says awakening to our timeless self. And transcendence for me is to go beyond the human, beyond the material. It's to go into, I love what Paul said, the mystical. And then the horizontal path is individuation. And that reminds me of Maslow, the path of self-actualization, individuation. And in IFS, it refers to embracing disowned parts to actualize our unique talents. So it's beautiful that we don't just depend on the self, but the self is also transcendent with integrated with the world. So that's really huge. I really love that image, vertical and horizontal. Thank you. I'm done.
Thank you, Marlene. Yeah, Anne?
Yeah, I really love that vertical and horizontal as well, Marlene, that you said. And also, Marie, I appreciate what you said about the non-duality. Like, I do find those teachings very frustrating in that they don't acknowledge at all the fact of the individual experience. I know, like, on another evening, I was complaining about her use of the wave particle thing, but then I realized she is using it metaphorically, and because I think people overuse this whole like, oh, that just explains everything, the particle wave duality. But I actually think it's a very now I think it's a very beautiful way of also describing this pattern, because at the very atomic level, there's no such thing as that atom or that electron being a wave or a particle. It literally behaves as both, and so that's kind of just a very I think it's a very apt metaphor for we behave as both, and we behave as individuals. We experience, especially in the Western world, so much an individual sense of who we are, and at the same time, we are just so interconnected. Everything affects us, and we're so part of this fabric, this universal fabric. So we behave in both ways, right? Both ways of seeing or modeling this, or both ways of describing our experience fit. And they're not necessarily contradictory. I guess that's the idea. It's we're used to thinking of it as contradictory, but it's not, and at the very, the core level of the nature of the universe, it's not contradictory. That's how atoms work, so yeah, I really think now it's quite a beautiful analogy that she brought.
Thank you. Guys, I would like to move to the metaphor allowed in the introduction. I think it's a very similar metaphor that Dick Swartz uses. Okay, here I'm gonna start here a little bit. Here. She says, deep within each of us, beyond parts, resides a vibrant and creative core, our true self. Firmly rooted in the non-dual teachings of Vedantic scripture and Western psychology, this innermost essence of our being possesses a remarkable capacity to harmonize and synthesize the various elements that comprise our inner world. Okay, here we go. Before this integration occurs, it's as if we have an orchestra full of talented musicians who are used to performing solo roles and not collaborating smoothly together. Some of these soloists carry traumas and wounds that lead to discordance and suffering when they try to play together. However, when the wise conductor, the self, takes the lead, all the parts begin to work in concert, playing beautifully as one. And what I loved about this is I've heard Dick Swartz talk about the orchestra, okay? But here she says, the musicians are soloists. They don't realize that they're part of an orchestra because of whatever wounds and traumas they carry. But once the conductor brings them all together, once they notice the conductor, once the conductor starts leading, self starts leading, then they can create beautiful music. Then we truly become like non-dual. Yeah. So I'm complete with this. So yeah, Marie.
Yeah, again, because I'm so new to non-duality, I'm so confused because please correct me because maybe it will clear up some of my confusion. I thought, and it could be totally wrong, that non-duality is that literally like we're consciousness or awareness, energy, but it's one source that we all kind of merge or blend into. So like you have a raindrop that's an individual raindrop, but then it drops into the ocean. It's no longer an individual raindrop. You cannot pick out the raindrop from the ocean because it's now become a part. It went back home and it's become a part of the ocean. And so to me, that's what I thought that non-duality was we are the ocean, not the raindrop. And so this description doesn't sound non-duality to me. It sounds IFS with multiplicity and parts working together as an orchestra. And so there's individual, like there's a violinist, there's a pianist, there's a flute. And I thought that in non-dual, there is no individual. So there would not be an orchestra of individuals playing different musical instruments because you're all just the ocean with one mind, one energy, one body of water, one consciousness, one awareness. And so that's why I'm super confused. So if somebody could help me out around that, that would be super grateful. Thank you.
Thank you. Anne?
Marie, you're right. I think that's why she's calling it not a duality, which I find with the pronunciation that MJ suggested, it's very clarifying, duality. So yeah, she is not like support, like not supporting, but she's not describing non-duality in that traditional sense. And you're right. I think I love the orchestra metaphor. It's not consistent with the typical non-dual concept of it's like the ocean. You're not thinking like, oh, it's every little water atom coming together in the ocean to create the ocean. It really is like the ocean is just this huge wave. And so that's why she's talking about this wave particle kind of, they both exist. And I think this orchestra example is much more just IFS. It doesn't have, I agree, it's not really capturing the non-dual aspect of what she's bringing in, even though you could think as the music merges together, it becomes its own, what's that word when things become more than their sum of their parts? Emergent, that's own emergent thing that's not the just separate entities together. It becomes greater than that. So in that sense, maybe the metaphor has some of that, but yeah, it's not the very rigorous, sense of non-dual. There's not actually distinct atoms and items to add together to make a whole. That's so I think your understanding is what I understand. I always have to look up non-duality. It's a very fuzzy concept, actually. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, MJ?
One other way, I was in this other book study. It was it was like a church thing, but somebody explained it that we are all the ocean, but then there's all those individual waves. When you look at the ocean surface, there's lots and lots of little tiny individual waves. And so that's each of us, but yet we're still all connected in this massive ocean. I just thought that was a neat way to think of it too.
I like what Dick Swart says. You're the particle, we are the particle and the wave. That's my understanding of chemistry. So yeah, Paul?
Yeah, at the bottom of that page that you're actually on there, it says the self is the source inspiring our paths of individuation and transcendence. Its compassionate nature, well, reflects the Tao is one word, the underlying unity that weaves together all things. So it's that idea, that our self as the greater self as well, or she calls it the Tao, I would call it Christ, is it's the intelligent, compassionate, caring, that has that there's a greater intelligence that wants the healing of all people, and the what's the realization of all people, which is where we're individuals, but we're also part of a greater whole, we're interconnected. And we're also in unity with the transcendent, No doubt she's going to talk about later on the chapters about Jungian, the greater collective unconscious and all that, which I've not studied before. So that's going to be new news to me. I know about it, but not studied in detail. But anyway, so yeah, I think, there's that compassionate, intelligent, greater, caring reality that wants our growth and transformation into growth. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Paul. I am here a little bit not sure here about this concept, duality. Yeah, she did speak about this duality, like you're both and one together. So that's a non-dual aspect. And she says, my belief is that by harmoniously blending parts work and duality, and duality means integral non-duality, we can transform our lives and consequently those around us. Yes, Anne?
I think that sense is a little bit confusing because I think duality is blending parts work with non-duality, right? Duality is her new concept of like non-duality while really recognizing the individual parts of the psyche and valuing individuation. So yeah, so I think that's why it's a little bit confusing, I think, if my understanding's correct. And I think it's because we come from the psychology heavy, in terms of the IFS angle. like people who are very heavily, maybe many people in this group are also like from the spiritual world, they very much like don't, it depends on the group, of course, but very much kind of diminish individual psychology. It's very much like, okay, you know, the oneness, the greatness, like that's linked to that. And so I think that's kind of why she's really just trying to really bring in both views and see how they coexist. You know, they're both part of our experience. They describe our experience. Yeah, I don't know if that adds anything to you.
You know, like personally, I can't see the difference between what she says and still the beginning. It's only like the first chapter. And but for me, IFS is a spiritual experience.
Yes, you're right. I think she's just, you're right. I don't think she's saying anything different from IFS. She's just kind of linking the spiritual aspect to IFS, which maybe isn't elaborated on as much.
It's not.
Yes,
Yes,
you're
it's
right.
not.
You're right. She's not saying something different. She's just elaborating on the non-dual spiritual part of IFS. Yeah, I think so.
She's elaborating it in a very intellectual way. Yes. That can, yeah, let's see.
Yeah, I haven't completely fleshed out where the non-duality is in her teachings, because I'm mostly hearing IFS right now from her.
Yeah.
With little non-duality. And so I'm hoping the book expresses a little bit more around that. And maybe it's just me, but I'm hearing strong IFS with very little, where is the duality in this? The non-duality.
The non-duality? Yeah. I think
Yeah.
IFS is non-dual. That's what, and I mean, what she says here, with tenderness and understanding, we can reconcile even our most extreme inner voices. This creates not only inner peace, but radiates outward into our relationships and communities. Yeah, and as we awaken to our true self, parts naturally let go of their conditioned identities and burdens, restoring their natural and helpful qualities. So, yeah, this sounds totally IFS to me.
I guess
yeah,
it's
I would
whole
disagree. I would
Go on.
disagree that like non-duality is completely opposite than IFS, because non-duality is we are one, period, end of story, if I understand that correctly. And IFS is no, we are multiple.
Well, she said with non-duality, she says, and both.
And that's her version. Yeah,
Yeah.
like that's her version. That's not actual non-duality. Yeah. Oh, yeah, I'm gonna have to really, this is gonna be a great book club. Thank you.
Yeah.
My brain is gonna explode.
Yes, Anne, were you gonna say something?
Oh, I guess I was just thinking, like, she does say, like, okay, self's wave-like potential, it's the universal field of consciousness, which is, as we're saying, IFS does talk about that, but she's kind of elaborating on it. I guess, I mean, I'm not so steeped in all the details of non-dual teachings, but my what I've been exposed to, they don't really add that much more detail other than, you know, you don't have to have the sense of self. You don't feel like separate from everyone else. It's descriptions of the experience plus the phenomenon that we're all interconnected. But I don't really know if I haven't encountered non-dual teachings that other than kind of describing like that you don't feel like a separate identity, you know, when you're occupying this non-dual state, they say, oh, you're seeing the nature of reality when you're, you know, occupying this non-dual state. I don't know if, I just feel like the non-dual teachings I've experienced, and someone should add to it who has had more experience, all is just like descriptions of this, oh, we're one, like variations of that phrase, you know, and we can feel like that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and as we said, the psychedelic experience can be the fast route to that, but it's not therapeutic unless it's
Yes, unless you're doing it with therapy, which is the whole point. Yeah.
Okay. And we covered introduction. Are we ready for chapter 1? So we've covered the first 3 pages.
I was going to make the point, can we not discuss chapter 1 next week, because we've not covered chapter 1. There's quite a lot in chapter 1.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Or maybe, I don't know. Yeah, in my audiobook, chapter 1 takes you like half an hour, and yes, maybe we can. Let's discuss at the end what we prefer to do. Okay, whether we want to cover chapter 1 and chapter 2 or just chapter 1. Wow. Yes. Is there anything else from the introduction? Here it says, Rumi says, unlearning is the highest form of learning. Yeah, so I'm guessing, that I understand we have parts that feel integrated and then they learn and take on burdens. They get traumatized. And then there is the split. This is a feeling of aloneness or rejection, whatever. So we need to unlearn all those, whatever.
Yeah, I
She
think
talks
it's more poetic than being like very
Ah.
technically comprehensively true, right? Because unlearning maybe is technically, okay, you learned something and you want to undo that. And then do you actually have something to learn? I think human mammals, we can't just throw them in the woods and like they know how to handle all situations, especially in our, in our modern society. There's a lot of complex things to like learn, right? So I think patently true that we have to learn stuff as well, not just not learn the things or unlearn the things that were not useful.
Well, once the parts feel witnessed, they'll go back to they want to go back to their natural state, which is like, playful and free, and it's very instinctive. You don't that's what I get what she says here. It's again IFS. So the parts don't need to learn a new way of being. They have a good instinct. They know how what their natural state is, freedom and carefree and playfulness and creativity. Oh, yes, Marie. Let's go in order. Yeah, Marie, do you see?
Yeah, kind of what's coming up for me around like unlearning is like I have a belief that I'm 30 years old.
Yeah.
But actually I'm not. I'm actually like timeless. I'm eternal.
Oh my God.
And I believe that I'm white, like a white female.
Mm-hmm.
But actually, if I unlearn that, I'm actually not. I'm actually a spirit that's like a spirit of light, not the color white. Or like I'm OCD. Am I OCD? No, actually, if I like that's something I've been labeled as, and if I remove that label, I actually am not OCD. I'm actually not autistic. I'm actually not handicapped. I'm actually not the labels that society in this world put on me. And so I have to unlearn that I'm not dumb. I'm actually pure consciousness and intelligence. I'm actually not a human. So I have to unlearn that and remember who I actually really am. So to me, like those are the things that are like coming up when she's talking about unlearning. And I could be way off, but that's kind of how my system is settling down with that. Thanks for letting me share.
Yes. Oh my God. Yes. That sounds so spiritual. Yes, Paul?
Yeah, no, I'm thinking about the thing about unlearning. I mean, I think we could, my parts or who I am, and, we have experience that we've learned, that I've learned or that we learn. But also it's important, years ago I learned this, it's important to say I don't know. Because if I say I know, then I'm not allowing for other explorations and other questions and for curiosity and for exploration and for growth. So I see that in my way of, rather than unlearning, I see it as I don't know, and there's areas for me to grow into or to explore. That's how I see that. What's that? The beginner's mind as well. That's another word.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Mind.
100%.
I actually need to leave now, so
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, great. So yeah, we're coming to an end. I don't know if there's anything else from the introduction we wanna share? Yeah, Marlene?
I was just thinking that non-duality in the book is mentioned with Buddhism. And I was looking to see about Thich Nhat Hanh, who wrote a book. He wrote many books, but he wrote one on the inner child. And I wonder how much that's related to IFS. I'm going to look that up. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's all I have.
Okay. So, guys, as we're coming to a close, anyone else, any more comments? And it looks like we haven't really covered chapter 1 at all. So,
It's very rich.
yes, it is. Great
I'm
discussion.
glad we're going slowly.
Yeah, great discussion. And I will stop the recording today on the 5th of October 2024. And we can continue with our private discussion.